Tom Trento, director of the United West, with a fascinating inside look at this crisis, this insurrection taking place in the United States right now. We feature John Guandolo, former special agent with the FBI, founder of Understanding the Threat. Trevor Loudon, extraordinary filmmaker, expert on Marxism. Clare Lopez, former CIA, Lopez Liberty LLC. And Laura Loomer, investigative journalist and current congressional candidate in the state of Florida. John, if you were called in to meet with the President of the United States and he said, folks, you got to help me out. How do we bring this to a close? I have federal authorities, but I'm a federalist. The states have to do their responsibility. The governor should be handling this. I have all these resources, but I want the states to handle it. Give me some advice. I don't want to seem over the top. I don't want to seem too weak. What do I do? John, you were in this situation many times with the FBI trying to figure out how to de-escalate and resolve very tense law enforcement situations. What is the protocol that ought to be followed by the president to analyze a solution to this problem?
Okay, so thanks for the question. That's a really good question. So I'm going to answer it exactly as you asked it. If I'm speaking to the president, I would say first you need to understand the threat, because what's happened in his presidency, like the previous presidencies, is there's no understanding about the threat in the people, in the advisory, in the National Security Council, the people right around in the National Security Advisory. They don't understand this. And I think that's where you got to begin. So first, sir, we need to get your folks to understand it. Now, let's assume that's been done. I think that's a tall order, but let's just, for the sake of this discussion, there is a lot at his disposal. First of all, the president can use federal powers to deal with what's going on because these are insurrections. The Constitution guarantees a Republican form of government to all the states, and he can take action. It would be nice if he does it in conjunction with the state governments, because they do have the authority to deal with these things. What's shocking, even to me after all these years, is you had the complete surrendering of American cities almost unanimously. I have seen no evidence that American cities were not totally surrendered in these last few days. And so first, there has to be a restoration of law and order. There has to be the use of the government that understands the threat. But I want to take 10 seconds and say this. If I'm not talking to the president, I'm talking to citizens, I would say the cavalry's not coming. The federal government is not going to take the right action. And so this war is going to be won or lost at the local level by citizens who understand the threat and use the tools that are out there for them, which is, again, that's what we do at Understand the Threat, empower them with tools to do this. I don't see this war being won any other way.
Trevor, you have written extensively on the Marxist mind. You have done theological, philosophical, sociological, economic work on how the Marxist, whether they call themselves Democrats, socialists, or whatever they're calling themselves, how they think and what motivates them. What do you think is necessary to get inside their mind to have them say, okay, it's time for me to stop and go about my business somewhere else. No looting, no stealing, no burning here today?
Look, the Marxists are hell-bent on destroying America. They would rather rule in hell than serve in heaven, to paraphrase Milton. So there is no stopping them with reason. There's no stopping them with polite talk. And there's certainly no point in Republicans trying to outflank the Democrats on the left by saying we're against Antifa, but we're right with Black Lives Matter on this one. Black Lives Matter is a revolutionary communist organization. Bill Barr, I think, is on the right track when he said the other day that he would use the laws, that it is a federal felony. It is a felony to cross state lines to participate in a riot. That applied toughly would stop this. Now, in 2014, with Ferguson, the Liberation Road Group openly boasted that they brought 10,000 people from outside Ferguson to help with those riots. That's the kind of scale we're talking about. If about 1,000 of those had just got out of jail after their 5-year terms, do you think this would be happening today? We have allowed this to happen because we've been so damn weak in the past. And this is going to take President Trump actually doing a State of the Union to the country, no kowtowing to Black Lives Matter, saying maybe a crime was committed, we will see. The courts will review this, but right now we're coming down hard on anybody who is going to ignore the laws of this nation and burn our cities. And if you are caught committing crimes, you can expect the full weight of the federal government to come down hard on you. I think that would stop it pretty darn quick.
Laura Loomer, what are your thoughts? Should the focus be Antifa, as bad as they are on the front lines? Should the president and his legal authorities be looking for a broader list of bad actors? Share your insight into that, Laura.
Well, I do think it's long overdue for Antifa to be designated as a domestic terrorist organization. But what's important for people to understand is that the efforts and actions of Antifa are not just central to the United States. Antifa is comprised of a global network all around the world. They have a very large faction in Europe where they carry out the same type of anarchist, communist, violent tactics. There have been FBI reports that show that members of Antifa have even been caught traveling overseas to places like Syria to train with ISIS. There are even Antifa college students that are mentioned in the same FBI report as having supported ISIS. And so there clearly is a Marxist jihadist alliance here, the Red-Green Alliance, Red-Green Axis, whatever you may want to call it. And there's many groups that are affiliated with Islamic terrorist organizations that are aiding and helping to train members of Antifa. When you look at the reason why Minnesota is such a hotbed for violence, and you have explosive devices being set off and you have violence in the street, well, it's because you have a full-blown Marxist jihadist alliance, okay? Many of the individuals who were actually carrying out the rioting in Minnesota were Somali migrants, okay? And when you look at the leadership, you have Keith Ellison, who is a jihadist. He is tied to the Dar al-Farouk Islamic Center, which the FBI has noted as producing multiple ISIS terrorists, okay? He is an ally of CARE, along with Ilhan Omar, the congresswoman in Minneapolis, where this violence is taking place. The foundation of a lot of this and the driving force behind a lot of this Marxist jihadist alliance here in America that we're seeing is CARE, right? The Council on American Islamic Relations, which I believe should be designated as a terrorist organization in America, right? I think that that it's long overdue for the Muslim Brotherhood to be designated as a terrorist organization. We saw discussions of this potentially happening within the Trump administration, but I've yet to see any action on that. And I do believe that America would be much safer, the world would be much safer, and we'd see a lot less of this radical violence and active terrorism that we're seeing across America if the Muslim Brotherhood, along with Antifa, was designated as a terrorist organization in America.
Clare Lopez, we know you very well, and we know that in the course of your 20 years with the CIA, you served in a few those S-hole countries and a few undesirable locations. As you have been reflecting upon this past week, have you in your thinking said, what is going on? This is like this country where I was, and how do we get out of this? What's the solution to the situation right now?
Well, if I were in my dreams, invited in some way to help provide advice to the President of the United States, the first thing I would say is this is his defining moment. We might have thought that the coronavirus crisis was his defining moment. It was a defining moment. This is now going to make or break his reelection bid come November 2020. The first thing that I would say is that he really ought to open up his channels to other advisors than he apparently has around him right now. He needs people who understand political warfare. He needs people who understand how information warfare is conducted, how the infiltration and the subversion and the propaganda wars are being waged. He doesn't have that, to the best of my ability to see at this time. I think once he gets on board, and he would be a quick study, once he understands those things, I think that he needs to make an address to the nation from the Oval Office. This has to be a very formal occasion. It should be from the Oval Office. It should be probably during prime time of the day. And what he should say is this: if the governors with whom he is meeting and speaking today, this very day, Monday, the 1st of June, if the governors of the states which are out of control, at the mercy of rioting thugs, do not move within the next 24 hours to establish law and order, President Trump, will federalize the National Guard. And that means across all 50 states. Then what he needs to say is, we're not talking about terrorism. We're not talking about domestic terrorism or anything like that. This is insurrection. This is revolt. This is revolt. This is an attempt to overthrow the constitutional republic. And we already have laws on the books, and this would be for the Attorney General too, on the books to deal with this. We don't need some new designation or list that doesn't exist in law at the current time. We need enforcement against the crimes that are being committed. This means arson, looting, rioting, seditious conspiracy. RICO laws might apply. All of these things need to be said by the Attorney General and the President both. These laws will be enforced by you, the governors, and if you don't do it, I will, in the voice of President Trump. The National Guard must be mobilized, and if necessary, other military troops. The Insurrection Act of 1807 governs this situation. That Insurrection Act of 1807 provides the one and only exception to posse comitatus, a law that was passed later on in the 1800s. Posse comitatus generally bans the deployment, the use of U.S. government military troops inside the United States on U.S. territory. But the exception to posse comitatus is the Insurrection Act of 1807, which allows the president to use military, U.S. government military troops in the case of revolt, rebellion, uprising, insurrection. And that's what we're facing now. So either the governors get things under control in the next 24 hours, the National Guard will be federalized, and the provisions of the Insurrection Act of 1807 will be put into effect.
So there you have, our subject matter experts have established, based upon the U.S. Constitution, legislation, case law, that indeed the President of the United States has the full authorities to utilize the Insurrection Act of 1807 to resolve issues of law and order in states if indeed the governors of those states are not fulfilling their obligation to provide safety and security constitutionally to the citizens of those states. This is not a strange idea. It's been used many times before in very select cases. And hopefully it won't be used too much in the future, as the governors will rise to the occasion to provide full protection and law and order to all their citizens. You've just watched part 3 of our 4-part series. Do not miss part 4, where we bring all of this together and make significant suggestions so that the United States can be led by clear-thinking people based upon solid constitutional law, a rule of law country. Stay tuned.